I don't know about you, but for me, this year has not gone according to plan musically. In that the start of the year, probably foolishly, said, I'm going to make 4 albums. And I don't think I've released any. And it's now the middle of September, which I count as being the final quarter of the year because the last 2 weeks of December are just, yeah, forget about it. Right. So I have 3 months left to make this, because this is the way I often think about it. How am I going to make this year the best ever year for my music? And I'm sure this may well be the case for many people. Life happens, things happen. I mean, for me, I had a big crisis here in April, and it was just a very, very terrible situation. It's fine now. We're okay. We know what we're doing. So that put a big explosion into my creative process and my time and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that happened for me was musically, I got super focused on developing my vocal instrument. It was almost like I realized what the problem was with my singing, and I realized what I needed to do about it. And that has caused some other problems finishing and releasing, because it's almost like my music is up. I mean, when I say up here, I'm talking relative. I'm not saying it's really brilliant. But my ability to make music, the notes and produce music, if you like, compose music is up here. And my ability to sing is down here. That's how I feel about it anyway. So that's another thing that has meant that I haven't released. And this is precisely the reason wanted to start singing, because I wanted to experience that feeling of being a beginner and struggling to get over the hump in terms of my music. Yeah. Because it's important to me as a coach to actually really experience these things. That was one of the reasons I actually started doing it. So that's job done. But in terms of my music, it's not been a great year. I have made great progress, but as we were just talking about, if you don't release, it's like you don't log your progress. It feels like you're not making progress. So I need to make sure that the last 3 months of this year make up, if you like, for the rest of the year. So how do you do that? And even if you've already had the best year musically that you've ever had, now's the time to capitalize on that, because we've got an ideal deadline, the end of the year, that we can work towards. So what I did, and I've done this before and I'll do it again, is I think about what I want to do in terms of 4 different measures. One is what is important, and I put that opposite to what is urgent. Because if you notice, one of the things about important and urgent is that what is urgent doesn't need to be important for you to do it. Urgency, I need to do this right now, means that you do it. So in other words, with urgency, time is on your side. And what often happens is we only ever focus on what is urgent. Now, I know in these types of things, usually you have important and not important at the opposite end. But what I like to do to get a different view is put different things at the end of each line. So I've got important on the right-hand side of the x-axis and urgent on the left-hand side of the x-axis. Similarly, in putting different things opposite each other, I've got what is impactful at the top on the y-axis and what is certain on the bottom on the y-axis. So in other words, there are certain actions that we can take that are, if they work out, if we get the result we want, create a high impact. But often you will notice that those things that could create a high impact make us feel uncertain, because it's unlikely that they are going to have that effect. Whereas there are other actions that have a relatively low impact, but which make us feel certain, right? So for example, in a piece of music, I'll give you an example of a piece of music. Let's say you're writing a song and you just know, this has happened to me many times, you just know that the chorus needs to be rewritten, but you don't know how you need to change it or whether you can write a better chorus. So you feel very uncertain about it. So what do you end up doing? Everything but writing, rewriting that chorus. You're avoiding rewriting that chorus. So in other words, you're avoiding the high impact thing and focus on other things that you know you can do that make you feel certain. So that's an example of impact versus certainty. So that's why I've put impactful and certainty opposing each other. Because by doing that and by actually thinking about what we want to do for the rest of the year and then putting those different things on this matrix, we can actually start to figure out what we do want to do. Because so often we end up spending our time doing things which are low impact, which make us feel certain, and which are urgent. And for greater progress and success, what we want to do is spend more of our time, not all of our time, that's probably not possible, but as much of our time as possible, focusing on high impact things that are important. So, this is how I do it, because if we look at what the right hand quadrant, what is both impactful and important, what I would call these are moonshots. Okay, so things which are high impact and probably not that likely to actually happen, but which we really want to do. I mean, we could think about these as dreams, or, well, in the ideal world, what would I do? What would I get done in the next 3 months? For example, for me, what I found was what I want to do for the next 3 months is record 40 songs, just one voice and one instrument. They can be released like that, right? I don't know whether I will release them or not, because I'll come to why that is in a second, but I want to finish the recordings of 40 songs in their simplest possible form. So what I did to come up with that was I did some free writing and thought, okay, so if I could do anything in my music for the final 3 months of the year, what would those things be? And I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I did that for a few days. And then I reviewed what I have written and crossed some things out. And what came out of that free writing process was that I wanted to record 40 songs. That is actually going to lead to the greatest progress for me as a musician right now. I want to close that gap between my ability to make music and my ability to sing. I mean, I don't think I'm going to completely close it because there is a time element here, but I know I can significantly close it, both in terms of my songwriting and in terms of my ability to sing. If I record 40 songs in the next 3 months, by the way, I'm including the songs that I'm finishing now for my album, then that would be a huge win. I don't know whether I can do it though. Probably not, but I'm going to try. So what I'm then doing is I'm moving that moonshot into how do I make it more certain? How do I make a moonshot something that I think I could do? Well, what I do is I turn it into a goal. So in other words, I break down the moonshot into achievable milestones. You've heard me talking about this many, many times before. So in other words, an ideal thing for me to do is to use the make an album with Mike process of the different milestones. So I need to make this number of ideas, then I need to execute on this number of ideas, and then I need to finish them off. So chunk those moonshots, create milestones. Because what you do when you break down a moonshot into its milestones, you realize that it is actually more achievable than you thought it was. If I was able to do this number of sessions, then it is theoretically possible that I hit that moonshot. I mean, a really good example is when I talk about the splurge challenge. 100 splurges in a month seemed like a lot once upon a time. And then eventually I did 108 splurges in one day. So it is amazing how much we limit ourselves. Again, it's not just about numbers and about going quickly. I totally get that. But it is incredible just how many ways we limit ourselves by what we believe we can and can't do. Okay. So what I prefer to do is start with a moonshot and chunk it into specific goals that have a specific date. Because what we need to do with those goals is we need to make them urgent. How do you keep doing the important things when you've got all of this other urgent stuff going on? Well, you make it urgent. Trying to do important things when you've got people going, oh, I need this, I need that, I need the other. It's really hard to do in a life where you've got people who are asking for things which are super urgent. So the only way, if you've got that kind of a life, to make a goal urgent is to put it on a deadline. You need to make them real. make it, okay, I need to finish this on that date. And of course, make an album with Mike. That's why I'm going to follow the make an album with Mike process to record these 32 songs when I finish the 8 that I'm finishing this week. I'm going to work towards those deadlines, even though deadlines kind of feel unpleasant. Actually embrace them. Deadlines have the wrong name. They need to be called lifelines, because when you're working towards a deadline, your creativity explodes. You go much quicker. You're able to make decisions. I mean, the drafting challenge that I did in this album is the best example for me, where I hadn't got anywhere near the 50 that I said I was going to do. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And then in the final weekend, because of that deadline, I ended up finishing and doing 51. And I was like, well, where did that come from? Oh yeah, it came from the fact that there was a deadline. That's what happened. I did this thing that I wasn't able to do because it was urgent. It had become urgent. So how to do important things is to make them urgent. So if we've got impactful and urgent, which are the deadlines that you set out of your goals, what is the dreaded bottom left of the quadrant? Those things which are urgent and make you feel certain. I know this isn't 100% true of all of them, but I'm going to call them busy work. The things which make you feel certain, but which are urgent. So in terms of my music, I'll give you some examples. And when I give you these examples, you might be somewhat surprised, because some of the things that I'm going to mention are going to become important at a different point in my career, or have been important at a different point in my career. So for example, at this point, I would call busy work for me, where I am as an artist right now, making full instrumental backing tracks for my songs, like fully producing my songs. Why? Because of my specific goals about improving as a songwriter and singer. Okay, so I, at this point, will call that busy work. So for instance, the I Think I Have a Problem song that I've shared with you, which has all of these, production stuff. I now look back on that, and I'm glad that I released it to the world, but I now look back on that and I'm going, why did I do all of that stuff? That was making me feel certain, and it was urgent because I was trying to finish it on time. So in other words, it was busy work. Once I've completed this 40 songs, once I've finished singing and writing and producing just the simplest version of these songs, that kind of thing will no longer become busy work. It will start to be much more important. But at this point, it's just not important for me to do that because I can already do it. I'm making these albums, I'm making this music in order to become the artist I want to be, rather than the other way around. I'm not becoming the artist I want to be in order to make albums. Another thing that I realize now was busy work was thinking about these albums as this kind of, I've still got it in my head and it's something I definitely want to do, but building this world, I got this concept and writing stories around it. And I was thinking about the release of my album as being this whole massive thing where I was kind of world building and telling a story and everything. And I realized it was actually taking me away from where my biggest goals are right now, which are, again, improving my songwriting and singing. So that at this point is busy work for me because it is urgent and it was making me feel certain, something that I could do, whereas I'm not sure about my singing. And bear in mind, just to reiterate, what I've said about this world building concept album thing is going to become important at some point in the future, but it isn't now. I mean, other things which are busy work are actual busy work, like, I don't know, EQing a hi-hat when it doesn't need to be EQ'd, or it's like doing what I was talking about when I was avoiding writing the chorus. That's also kind of busy work as well. You will find yourself in your life doing a lot of busy work. Things like checking your email when you don't need to, scrolling on social media, looking at the latest, I don't know, equipment that's coming through, doing often, not always, but often doing tutorials for no particular reason. It's stuff that makes you feel certain. And often it will have a good reason for you to do it. But actually, there's not as good a reason to do that as to do something else. So what you want to do with this busy work are 4 things. There are 4 possibilities. Number 1, and the best one, my preferred one, is to delete. Just don't do it. So That's, as I've said, is what I'm doing with these songs. So I'm actually giving myself a rule: one voice and one instrument. So I'm not even doing the backing vocals. I'm just doing one voice and one instrument. That's going to really zero me into my area of biggest improvement. Something else you can do with some of that stuff is delegate. A good example of this is employing a mix engineer, or delay. Now, I guess in a sense, that's what I'm doing with both the instrumental backing tracks and the world building concept album, and even releasing the stuff, is putting those things to one side while you focus on your biggest opportunity right now, your moonshot here. So you can either delete, you can give it to someone else to do, or you can delay. Another thing that you can do as well is you can develop a way in which it gets done automatically. Now, this doesn't really work with me making full instrumental backing tracks or the world building concert album. But for example, with things like checking email or doing social media or that kind of busy work, there is often a way of developing a system or developing an even completely automated way of doing it so it's just getting done without you having to decide to do it. The urgent and certain stuff is the biggest time suck. It's the thing that we can end up spending most of our time doing, but it is the least impactful by definition. So that's how I am going to pull this year out of the jaws of defeat and elevate it into the something or other good of success by focusing on what is the most important and impactful thing I can be doing with my music right now. And what I'm doing with my music is going to be very different from what you need to do with your music. It depends on where you're at as an artist and what you want to get out of the process. And for me, singing, songwriting, I know that's the biggest opportunity, which is why I am designing my next 3 months for my music to deliver the most growth in those areas. So if, like me, your dreams for your music this year are in tatters, there is still time. There's 3 months left. There's 3 full months left to get your music sorted, get into a much better place. I can think of no better way than finishing an album and developing your unique style at the same time. And there's still time to join the final Make Music with Mike program of the year. We're starting in 24 hours from the time I released this podcast. So if you're interested in that, simply send me an email to mike@makemusicalife.com and I'll send you all the details.